All right, today we are talking about how something that's really hard to see, it's a hidden world, impacts your garden and how you choose your best garden location. Today we are talking about soil. I'm Amy Landers with Gardens That Matter, where we help families create beautiful, bountiful gardens together. Hello, welcome. I'm glad that you are watching. Thanks for tuning in. We are talking about choosing the best location for a veggie garden during this week. We've got each day we'll talk about a different factor. And so far you've thought about, if you've been following along, or if you haven't, you can go back and catch these videos in our feed, but where is the most convenient location, and thinking about where you travel each day, where your kids are playing, so a convenient location. Hopefully you've identified at least one, and then you found out, does it have enough sun? Most of our vegetables need at least 4, many of them need 6 or 8 hours of sun. So yesterday we talked about sunlight and how to kind of measure that. Today we're going to talk about soil. And if soil is a new topic to you, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. I'm a kind of a soil nerd. Hey mom, see that you're joining us. As you guys are joining, pop a quick hello into the comments or give me a thumbs up and it lets me see that you're there. So if you are new to soil, I talk about soil quite a bit. It's definitely like one of the keys to a happy garden is healthy soil. So today we're going to touch on a few factors of soil as they relate to choosing your garden location. But if you want ideas for improving your soil, we definitely have those over on our blog and in our video stream, ideas for you as far as compost and mulch and things like that. So if you're interested, you can ask a specific question, whether you're watching this live or on replay. If you ask me a question, I usually will catch that comment and I will come back and answer those later on. All right, so soil obviously is important. That's that keystone for our garden. And so when you're choosing a location for your vegetable garden, what do you need to consider? You are looking for soil that is well draining and fertile. So most vegetables like to be babied a little bit. If you have soil that is compacted or really not fertile, like really sandy soil where the nutrients are gone, do not despair. There are plants that will grow in that area, but if you want vegetables to grow there, you may need to work on that soil or choose a different location accordingly. So how do you know if that is something that you're gonna need to do? So, oh, I see Aunt Debbie's on. Hello, thank you for sharing. Awesome. All right, so I want you to do a test. It's actually gonna be 3 tests, but you can do them all at once. All right, test number 1 is to go dig a hole. How hard is it to dig? How compacted is your soil? How rooty is the area? And where you're digging specifically is the place or places that you identified as potential garden based on convenience and sunshine. So this is where you're thinking about adding a new growing area, planting some new things, or starting your first garden, right? You're gonna dig a hole. I want you to dig a 12 by 12 by 6 inch hole. Get my hands up in the screen. So 12 by 12 by 6 inch. And all the soil that you take out of there, I want you to put it into a bucket or onto a piece of cardboard, because we're going to come back to it in part 2. But as you're digging, what's it like? Is it really heavy? Is it really sandy? Is it really muddy? Like if it's really soggy and it hasn't rained lately, like that's going to be a good clue that that soil doesn't have good drainage. And we'll come back to that with test number 3. All right, so you're just getting a feel for your soil in test number 1. Rub it between your hands, look at it, what's the color like, just get to know your soil a little. Now, test number 2 is going to be a worm count. If you've done our 7-day challenge, this is part of it, and it actually might be today's assignment. So if you haven't ever done our 7-day challenge, I would invite you to join us. We have one that starts each Friday, and so you can find the link to it in the description. And it will walk you through kind of the basics of getting ready to garden this year. Now, your worm count. If you're not doing the 7-day challenge, here's what you have to do. You get the soil from that 12 by 12 by 6 inch section, and you're going to count it. So this test is inspired by one of my favorite books about soil called Start with the Soil by Grace Gershuni. And you're just going to count the worms, and you are looking for somewhere around 10 worms in that much space. If you have more worms than that, great. That is a good sign that your soil life is healthy. Earthworms tend to be near the top of the soil ecosystem's food chain. Then, of course, worms feed a lot of other things, right? Moles and birds and all kinds of other things that can find worms. But in what do worms eat? They eat bacteria and fungi and other microbes. So when you have a healthy worm population, that's a good sign that the rest of the tiny ecosystem in your soil is healthy. Now, 10 or more, you're in good shape. You may need to add like an inch or so of compost. If you have a lot less than that, then you're going to start thinking about, well, one, what's going on in my soil that it's not supporting soil life, and two, I'm going to need to add organic matter to my soil in the form of, most likely, compost. All right, number 3, test number 3 is we're going to look at drainage. So put that soil and those worms in a shady spot, because you're going to use them to fill your hole in later, but first you're going to make your hole bigger. You're going to go down another 6 inches. So you're going to get 12 by 12 by 12. So a nice big hole. It doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't need to be a square hole, just roughly, right? If you need to go a little wider to get that deep, sometimes to get a deeper hole, you end up having to dig a wider hole, especially if you're digging with kids, because you got to have room to get the shovels in there and scoop it out. Then once you have that hole that's about 12 inches deep, you're going to fill it with water. That may take some time for you, and then let it drain. And then you're going to come back again as soon as it finishes draining, if you can. You may have to, depending on the situation, you may not be able to do it like right as soon as it drains, but do your best. Then you're going to fill it up again and see how long it takes to drain that second time. Let's say you're doing this in the afternoon, you fill it up, it's evening, you come back in the morning and there's still water in there, you've got a drainage problem, and you're going to have to think about that when you're gardening. If it drains right away, you actually probably have sandy soil, so you are definitely going to need organic matter. If it drains within that 8 hours, but not like immediately, then you're probably in pretty good shape. You've got well-draining soil, but it's not so well-draining that you're going to like have trouble keeping moisture in your soil. Okay? Now, let's talk about your options from here. So you've decided this is the good spot for your garden. Now you think, oh, my soil's not ideal. Does that mean I have to find another spot? And the answer is maybe. Okay? So your soil is maybe not fertile, or it's not draining well, or it's draining too well. You could look at some of your other options. If you've identified several potential places for a garden, go try these soil tests, this series of 3 tests, the dig, the worms, and the water, in another spot, and see like maybe that's going to be a better place. If this is the spot, you're pretty sure, we are going to talk about 2 more factors the rest of this week, but like this is your top favorite spot, it's really where you want to put it, then you can start to think about either improving that soil or moving up and doing a raised bed. So improving that soil, adding organic matter is almost always going to be one of the factors, right? So you're going to be able to add composted manure. You can also do a soil test, like an official soil test, so you understand the acidity and the mineral makeup of your soil. So if you really are ready to improve that soil, I would definitely recommend doing that. Go to see your extension agent, your local extension service, and often they will have a free or low-cost soil test. So that's kind of your next step if you know you need to amend it. If you're not sure about that, or you don't have time, or you kind of just want to do something else, then think about going up. So here's your soil, right? And maybe it doesn't drain well, or it's not fertile and you're not sure exactly what's going on, and you just don't want to worry about that right now. Think about doing containers or raised beds. So obviously containers, you are bringing in all of the soil. So you're probably going to get a soil mix, which is actually a soil-less mix. So it's going to have like some sort of coconut coir or peat moss, some perlite or vermiculite, and some compost in it. A lot of times you're purchasing the whole mix for a container. Or a raised bed, and in the case of a raised bed, you might be buying a topsoil compost mix. You might again be getting that soilless mix. That's the mix of different materials that are going to be lightweight well draining, and fertile. There's some expenses associated with buying soil and buying compost and buying these things. So it's not a great long-term plan, and you're having to bring things in, right? So if this is the direction you're going to go this season, as you're doing it, I also want you to think about getting your compost pile going, saving your organic waste, your leaves, your neighbor's leaves and grass clippings. If you see your neighbor throwing some grass clippings in the trash, you are going to go over there and talk to them and tell them, I could use that. Bring it over to my yard and then make a space, a compost pile for it. We definitely have lots of resources to help you with that. So if you're interested, let me know, or click over onto that 7-day challenge, because it brings you to composting at the end and helps you get started with that. So with your soil, ideally you're going to find that you have this really great soil in the spot you've identified. But if you don't, you do have options to do containers or raised beds with some long-term sustainable options in mind as well. You can do one thing this season knowing that in future seasons you'll be creating your own compost or doing mulching or sheet mulching to build to make the rest of your soil healthy, so that as you expand your growing, you have beautiful, rich soil to grow into. So if you have any questions, I would love to hear from you. We've got 2 more factors the rest of this week to talk about in choosing the best site for your vegetable garden. As always, thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, happy gardening!